Thank you for downloading this podcast on 702.co.za or capetalk.co.za.
Some respect the property of others. What are you doing to lead us a?
011-883-0702. If you're in Johannesburg, 012-446. It's 021, is it? It's 021, yes. I'm confusing Pretoria with Cape Town. 021-446-0567 in Cape Town. My name's Katie, and I'm standing in for Reedy. If you've tuned in expecting to hear Reedy this morning, or if you think you might have heard her voice earlier, you are not going senile. You're not going crazy. You actually did. Reedy had to step out. She's not feeling well, but I'm sure she'll be absolutely fine before her show tomorrow. I spoke in the previous 15 minutes about our cartoon on EWN around SAPS and the image or the branding problem, the image problem that SAPS may have. I'll actually tweet the picture and tweet the cartoon later. Otherwise, please go through to ewn.co.za and have a look at My Name is Germs cartoon. We're changing tack now. We're talking about something totally different. We're talking about unmarried fathers, about single fathers and their rights and the access they have to their children. In a country in which nearly half of the children under the age of 18 grow up without fathers, South African fathers do have a reputation for being deadbeats who leave mothers to cope with financial and emotional demands of raising youngsters alone. Or is that true? And is that about to change? Last month alone, the National Office of the Family Advocate, which assists families in legal disputes involving children, listen to this figure, opened more than 1,400 parental rights cases from fathers who wanted greater access to their children. And I've got to tell you, when I hear stats like that, I become extremely encouraged. The role of parenting cannot fall on one parent alone and cannot fall on a mother, but it needs to be the responsibility of both parents, a mother and a father. In studio with us today, we've got Mr. Van Ginkel. And we have to refer to him as, we're going to refer to him as Mr. Van Ginkel, for the duration of the show, only because, can I call you Van Ginkel?
Yes.
Van Ginkel, we can't say your full name, and we don't want to say your full name. We want to protect the identity of your children. You are still in court at the moment. You are still fighting and battling to get access to your children.
That's right. Thank you.
Tell us your story. How did it come to this?
Kate, in the past 5 years, I've been trying to gain access to my daughter that was born out of wedlock. The amount of access that I managed to get was 5 hours in 5 years. My legal costs is running close to R1 million by now. But the biggest problem was the Office of the Family Advocate, who still practices the maternal preference doctrine, which is an archaic concept that was done away with decades ago internationally. In the light of the fact that we've got a new Children's Act which supports the best interest of the child, it's difficult for them to still practice the maternal preference doctrine, but yet they do, because they still prefer the mother. They assume that a mother is a better parent.
But we had a law in South Africa that did favor mothers, but now that has been changed. Has that not benefited at all?
The law has been changed. The major difference in the Children's Act is that in the past it was assumed that it's a parent's right to have contact with a child, where in the new Children's Act it's in fact the child's right to have equal access and contact with both its parents. Unfortunately, the term best interest of a child is loosely defined or ill-defined. And it's being used as a one-size-fits-all excuse by legal practitioners and the divorce industry, because it is an industry that is self-perpetuating and thrives on conflict. The industry won't survive if there's amicable divorces. So where the Office of the Family Advocate cannot find factors to disqualify a father, they will in fact try and make reasons up for not practicing the maternal preference rule, and they will hide behind the term best interest of a child.
Well, the Children's Act, as you say, has been slightly amended. Let's chat very quickly to Karabo Ngidi from Pretoria. Karabo, good morning and welcome to Talk Radio 702 and Cape Talk 567. You are from the Centre for Child Law at the University of Pretoria.
Yes.
Can you talk us through what is the effect of the amendments to the Children's Act that came into effect in 2010?
Okay, I think as Mr. Van Ginkel was saying, the law is framed a bit accommodative and it acknowledges unmarried fathers. So you have Section 21 that says that if a father is unmarried, was living with the mother in a permanent life partnership at the time that the child was born, they automatically qualify for parental rights and responsibility. And then if they had identified themselves either by paying damages in terms of customary law or by doing paternity tests and all that, and they contribute or attempt in good faith to contribute towards the child's upbringing and for a reasonable period, contribute or has a potential to contribute to the child's maintenance for a reasonable period, then they will automatically qualify. So that's the first leg. The second leg, and I think that's where Mr. Van Ginkel and many unmarried fathers then hit problems, is the exercise of the rights. So then what happens is that if you determine that an unmarried father qualifies, now they have to get to how do they exercise the right. And he's correct in saying that the rights are essentially the child's rights. So then the issue of best interest come into play to determine if this child, in these circumstances, what would be the best way for this child to maintain relationship with the father if the child is not living with the father. So that's where you do a best interest analysis. Section 7 of the Children's Act does have guiding principles in terms of how you determine best interest, and we do hope that that's been used. Important issue is that it's very difficult because each case has to be determined on their own basis, and it's worrying if people do feel that that individual approach is not used, because all our laws and all the precedents from the Constitutional Court make it very clear that best interest it's not a one-size-fits-all. It allows you to determine a particular child's best interest or what's good for that child under their own prevailing circumstances. And that's why reports that are done by officials who work in the field and all that must always know that the child that I see today and their circumstances is not the same as the child I saw yesterday. It's not going to be the same as the child I see tomorrow. So basically that's the gist of the best interest and the provision in Section 21.
And under which circumstances does a father with a child who's born out of wedlock obtain parental rights and responsibilities? Do they have those rights and responsibilities?
Well, I was mentioning the Section 21 because what the requirements that I said out loud, I read for you now. If they comply with those requirements, they acquire those rights automatically. Right. So, for instance, if Mr. Van Ginkel was living with the mother of the child, even if they were not married at the time that the child was born, then he automatically has the parental responsibilities rights. That's guardianship, the right to have contact, the right to also have care. Care, can also include the custody part, which we don't use custody that much, but it can include it. Then, as I said, the problem comes into now. These people are not living together. How do we best make sure that the child maintains relationship with both of them? And now you have to look at it from a best interest approach, and that's where a lot of the professionals come into play. Your social workers, the psychologists, the family advocate. Now they have to do a report about what would be the best way for the child to maintain a relationship with this father that doesn't live with this child anymore. Is your
office seeing an increasing number of fathers coming forward trying to obtain the rights to see their children and desperate to actually have access to their kids?
There is an increase. Unfortunately, our center doesn't represent parents, so we will actually represent the child. For instance, if a child is caught up between such a dispute and it's a child who, once we interview the child, we see that this is a case that's very important constitutionally, and the child needs to be represented to get his or her voice heard under those circumstances that prevail. Then we will represent the child. But we have a lot of queries from fathers, and we refer them. There are other NGOs that are able to help. So we have places that we refer them. We know that people like the Law Society of the Northern Province have a pro bono project where we know that they have assisted some of the unmarried fathers that came through to us, and we referred them to them. But we unfortunately don't represent any of the parents. We represent the children if we ever do get involved in such cases.
All right, Karabo, thanks so much for your call. That's Karabo Ngidi. She is an attorney for the Centre for Child Law at the University of Pretoria. Van Ginkel, you say you've seen your daughter for 5 hours in the past 5 years. Yes,
that's correct. And the irony of the matter is I was the primary caregiver for the first 2 years of her life.
So she does know you?
She used to. After 5 years, she doesn't know me anymore.
This must tear you apart.
Well, I'm beyond the point where I get emotional about it.
Wow, it's certainly very difficult. Gary De Silva is on the line. He's the media officer for Fathers for Justice. Gary, emotional stories all around. I'm actually reading some SMSs which come through here to say I had to force the father of my child to actually see him and pay maintenance. A court couldn't help, so I just sent my son to live with him. So you see these both juxtaposed positions. A father on the one hand in studio with us, desperate to see his daughter, spent 5 hours with her in 5 years. Where does Fathers for Justice come in here?
Katie, we campaign for the right of the child to have a joint, equal, shared relationship with both parents post-divorce or separation. Your previous caller is talking about the best interests of the child. The state has been and is derelict of duty and is engaging in gross human rights violations and child abuse en masse. They have failed to provide parents the basis upon which you define the best interests of the child. They failed to give us the golden rule. So, in the instance, just as much as you've got, for every deadbeat father that you want to serve up to me, I can show you a good father. So, it's not about deadbeat fathers and good fathers. Why do you want to keep the good fathers in the legal system? Myself and Section 35, the guys, our group, are standing up and saying we are present and accountable. Why do you want to keep guys like Fathers for Justice and Section 35 in the courts? Van Ginkel pointed to the fact that, it's all about money. And that is the basis of this. This is about the legal and psychological child-abusing divorce industry making money off the backs of our children.
Wow, that's certainly some statement. We were going to end this conversation at 11, but I think it's worthwhile carrying it on afterwards. I want us to talk a little bit more. I want us to talk to our guest, Van Ginkel, who's in studio battling to see his daughter.
This is Annie Lennox. Stand up, lead SA, and speak out against rape and abuse.
Well, there we have it. We just heard it in the latest Eyewitness News, exactly what we had been speaking about in the previous hour with regards to Brand SA, Brand SAPS. Uveka telling us that there is a memorial service which is being held in Davidton for the Mozambican national who was dragged to his death behind a police vehicle. And at the same time, there is a National Police Day celebration taking place in Johannesburg. The juxtaposition of that, it is just the contradictory message that we are sending out needs to be addressed urgently. But that's not what we're talking about this morning. We're talking about fathers who try desperately to get access to their children. We've got Mr. Van Ginkel in studio today, but he is in court. He's going through a very lengthy court process in a bid to see his daughter. It's been a 5-year-long process. He had this child out of wedlock. He knew her for the first 2 years of her life and has been battling for the past 5 years to try to get some access to her. And we are taking your calls on 8830702 and 4460567 if you have any comments on this. Before we went to the break, Mr. Van Ginkel, we spoke to Fathers for Justice, and they said it's all about money. It's a money-making business. It's about lawyers talking to lawyers. You can't get out of the system. And my question to you is, if you wanted to resolve this with the mother of your child, are you able to contact her to sit down and say, look, it's in the best interest of the child for her to have both parents. Let's try not to be killing each other in courts. Let's try not to communicate via lawyers, but let's actually talk about our child. We share a child together. Is that a possibility that'll maybe take you out of the circle of lawyers and courts and money? Because I can only imagine you've spent a fortune.
Kate, I've spent about close on $1 million. Unfortunately, there's absolutely no way for me to communicate with the mother. Everything has to happen through the lawyers. After 5 years, the amount of paperwork, allegations, counter-allegations, and vexatiousness that has developed is virtually impossible to resolve. The only forum that can resolve it is a court of law by order.
Wow. So if you said to your attorney and you said, I want to have a sit down and I want to have a heart-to-heart with this woman because I miss my daughter, is that not possible?
It's possible to ask him that, but all that's going to happen, he's going to say to me, no, I spoke to your ex-girlfriend's lawyer, and he says, no, she's not interested. Whether that would be true, I don't know, because probably the lawyers between the two of them will decide not to have it the amicable way, because then the gravy train stops for them.
So if you've spent R1 million, almost, how much has she spent?
She's getting pro bono services, which was organized for her by an advocate at the Office of the Family Advocate.
But this is close to R1 million you could have invested in your daughter.
It could have taken my daughter right to tertiary education in luxury.
Wow. Peter in Randburg, you say there is a gap between what the law says and what is actually being practiced.
Very much so.
Tell us.
Very, very much so. Hi. It's a long story. I'm going to try and stick to the key things. A psychiatrist told me that my wife shouldn't have unsupervised contact with my son.
Your wife shouldn't have.
Correct.
Right.
She's had a number of stints in psych hospitals, and she was recommended to commit herself to a state psychological institution, which she hasn't done. So anyway, that and a whole lot of other factors, I approached the family advocate to assess the situation. Partly because the psychiatrist said that she wouldn't disclose to anyone else what she'd said about my wife and the unsupervised access unless the family advocate instructed her to do so. So I approached the family advocate. I put in an application. They lost the application twice. Every time I had to reapply, I had to go through it, so bureaucratically they were a disaster. When eventually we had an appointment and we got to see them, they lost the application again, so we had to redo all of the information for that. Then something happened at a human level between my wife and, because there's two people that handle your case. One, my understanding, is a legal person, and one is a social worker, psychological kind of perspective. My wife just happens to be a person who's very convincing. She connected with the legal person, and
what happened?
We had to present, each of us on our case, a history of ourselves, what psychological interventions we had,
So are you basically saying, Peter, without going into the history of your case, unfortunately, because we don't have time, are you basically saying that we need more efficient people on the other side of the system if this is to be speeded up?
And we need unbiased, because when the report eventually came out, and there's another bit of a story about that. When I went to pick it up, because they never notified me, and I phoned, where's the report? Eventually, yes, the report's available. I went in there, nobody knew where the report is. Eventually, they took me to an office full of brown cardboard boxes, and I had to ferret around in the boxes to find the report. But anyway, the report was a total whitewash, an absolute total whitewash. They selectively quoted from one report from a psychologist, and selectively left out things indicating, for example, that the psychologist said that my wife and son had serious issues that need to be resolved, and that she refused to come back to address any of those things, just for example.
Wow.
And they seriously whitewashed the whole thing and said that they recommend that everything indicates that the child should have primary residence with the mother. So
thanks for that, Peter. We're going to leave it there. But does what Peter say resonate with you, Van Hinkel? Inefficiency, bias, that type of thing?
The efficiency is actually deliberate inefficiency. That is part of their method of discriminating against the father. The bias against us is clear. It's official. It's still the maternal preference doctrine. Just to elaborate on that, I have statistics in the form of a sworn affidavit from a family advocate working at the Pretoria office. On average, a family advocate handles 288 cases per year. In 2010, this particular family advocate awarded primary care to the father in 4.1% of cases for 2010. In 2011, this particular female advocate's score improved by 100%, when in 2011 she awarded in 9.7% of cases she felt it was in the best interest of the children to be with the father. That being, it's less than 1 in 10 cases. Now, in our society where most fathers and mothers work and share equal workloads and schedules, I'm not going to be told that in 9 out of 10 cases it's in the best interest of the child to be with the mother. It simply doesn't resonate equality.
And that's why you've gone to the Equality Court here.
The Equality Court was my last avenue. I first went to the Commission for Gender Equality, and then I laid a complaint with the Public Protector's Office, of which nothing has come after 2 years. And that's why I went to the Equality Court, and we are 9 applicants against the Minister of Justice, and we are suing them for 71 million rand worth of damages, because we feel we We qualify to receive damages for what was done to us by an organ of state.
And how far are you in this application now?
The problem at the North Gauteng High Court is there's no properly qualified judges available to listen to our case at this point in time. So once the Vice Judge President appoints a qualified judge in the Equality Court, then our case can go ahead.
Well, we're going to be watching this case closely because I think it's going to be precedent-setting. Either way, this is Van Ginkel we're talking to today. He is the father of a young girl he hasn't seen in 5 years, and together with another few fathers, they've gone to the Equality Court and demanding 71 million rand in damages because they're saying it is just not fair that they have been denied access to their children. We need to wrap it up, Van Ginkel. Thank you so much for coming in. But I've got one final question for you. In all of this legal process, because my question goes beyond the legality, it goes to the parenting of it. It goes to the heart of it because I've got 2 children myself and I know that they would be devastated without seeing either of their parents. Despite the legal process, have you still been unable to take your daughter for a milkshake on a Saturday afternoon? Is that not possible?
It's impossible. If I wanted to see her, I have to pay 1,900 rand per hour to a supervising educational psychologist in a public place.
That sounds like a really, really tough position to be in. Good luck.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck to all parents, actually, who are in this position, whether they're mothers or fathers, actually, fighting for justice and fighting for access to their children.